What happens when a veteran cop's unchecked prejudice and hidden secrets collide with the unflinching gaze of a woman who holds the key to his downfall? Officer James Carter, a white policeman with decades on the force, cruises the sunlit streets of an upscale American city, his badge a shield of untouchable authority. At 62, he's grown accustomed to wielding power without question, his confidence bordering on arrogance. On a routine patrol, a sleek black luxury sedan speeds past, catching his eye. Behind the wheel is a black woman, elegantly dressed, navigating the pristine avenues of a wealthy neighborhood. Suspicion stirs in Carter's mind, not based on evidence, but on a deep-seated bias he's carried for years. He pulls her over, his strides firm, his tone dripping with contempt as he demands her documents. "Nice car. Sure it's yours?" he sneers, his words laced with venom, expecting fear or submission. But the woman, Grace Thompson, meets his aggression with a calm that unsettles him. Her steady gaze and measured responses, handing over her license without a tremor, defy his usual script. Carter doubles down, hurling insults, unaware that Grace is the wife of his new precinct captain, William Hayes. She says little, but her silence carries a weight that lingers in Carter's mind as she drives away, her composure unshaken. That night he can't shake the memory of her eyes, a quiet challenge that gnaws at his conscience. Back at the station, Captain Hayes summons Carter. The air grows heavy as Hayes, a man of ironclad principles, confronts him about the stop. "You crossed the line," he says, his voice low but sharp. Carter's heart races. He's been caught, but not just for the stop. Whispers of his affair with a colleague's wife, Linda, have reached Hayes's ears. To redeem himself, Carter is thrust into a dangerous undercover mission to infiltrate a drug ring tied to corrupt cops. Every step is a tightrope walk, with Hayes watching closely and Carter's past threatening to unravel him. For a man who thought he'd seen it all, the real battle is just beginning. Will he survive the consequences of his own making? James Carter, at 62, had patrolled the streets of this sprawling American city for over 3 decades. His badge, a second skin, his authority as natural as breathing. The sun hung low, casting golden hues across the manicured lawns and gleaming facades of Pinewood Heights, an upscale enclave where wealth whispered in every immaculate garden. Carter didn't often come here. His beat was the grittier corners of the city, where his sharp eyes and sharper tongue kept order. But today, restless and bored, he cruised these quiet streets, the hum of his patrol car a familiar comfort. His silver hair caught the light in the rearview mirror, a reminder of the years etched into his face. Years that had hardened his heart, leaving little room for doubt or remorse. Then he saw it, a black luxury sedan, sleek and out of place, weaving just a touch too fast through the pristine neighborhood. Carter's instincts kicked in, not from evidence, but from something darker, a prejudice that had rooted itself deep within him over decades. Behind the wheel was a black woman, her elegant attire stark against the car's leather interior. What's she doing here, he thought, his lips curling into a faint sneer. He flicked on his lights, the red and blue pulses cutting through the dusk like a warning. The car pulled over smoothly and Carter stepped out, adjusting his belt with a deliberate swagger, his holster a heavy reminder of his power. He rapped on the window, harder than necessary, his eyes narrowing as it rolled down to reveal Grace Thompson. She was poised, her dark eyes meeting his with a serenity that made his skin prickle. "License and registration," he barked, his voice devoid of warmth. Grace complied, her movements steady, handing over the documents without a flicker of fear. That alone unsettled him. Carter was used to trembling hands, stammered excuses. "Nice car," he said, his tone dripping with insinuation. "Sure it's yours?" Grace's gaze didn't waver. "Yes, officer. I bought it with my money," she replied, her voice soft but edged with steel. The words hit Carter like a slap, but he pressed on, leaning closer, his breath sour with coffee. "This neighborhood's not used to folks like you driving cars like this. Where you headed?" His words were a challenge, laced with the venom of a man who'd never been questioned. "I live here," Grace said, simply nodding toward a street lined with elegant homes. 3 years now?" Her calm was infuriating, a quiet defiance that made Carter's blood simmer. He scanned her documents, searching for any flaw, any excuse to tighten his grip on the situation. Finding none, he shifted tactics. "You know, it's easy to mistake a car like this. People might think you're up to something." His smile was cruel, his words a thinly veiled accusation. Grace's eyes darkened, but her voice remained even. "People like me? And what does that mean, officer?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Carter smirked, stepping back. "You know what I mean. Let's not play games." He radioed dispatch, pretending to run a check, his voice loud enough to intimidate, but Grace sat unbothered, her arms crossed, her silence louder than his bluster. "You're bold, aren't you?" Carter snapped, his patience fraying. This could go badly for you. He expected her to crumble, to beg. Instead, she looked at him, her gaze piercing through his bravado. "Can I go now?" she asked, her tone cutting like glass. Stunned, Carter hesitated, then shoved her documents back. "Keep an eye out, we're watching you," he warned, his voice hollow as she drove off, the sedan's engine fading into the twilight. That night, Carter's mind churned. Grace's unflinching calm haunted him, her eyes a mirror reflecting something he didn't want to see. He tossed in bed, his wife Ellen's soft breathing a distant sound in their cold, silent home. At 60, Ellen had long stopped asking about his day, their marriage a shadow of its former self. But Carter's unease wasn't just about Grace. Whispers of his affair with Linda, the wife of his colleague Tom, had begun to circulate, a secret that could ruin him. The next morning, Captain William Hayes called Carter to his office. Hayes, a towering figure with a reputation for fairness, stood by his desk, his expression unreadable. "Close the door," he said, his voice low but heavy with authority. Carter obeyed, his heart pounding. "Yesterday you stopped a woman in Pinewood Heights," Hayes began, his eyes locking onto Carter's. "Care to explain why?" Carter's throat tightened. "Routine stop, sir. She was speeding, acting suspicious." The lie felt thin, but he clung to it. Hayes leaned forward, his voice colder now. "Suspicious? Or did you just assume she didn't belong?" Carter froze, realizing Hayes knew more than he let on. "That woman," Hayes continued, "was my wife, Grace." The room spun. Carter's arrogance drained away, replaced by a sinking dread. Hayes' next words were a blade. "I've heard other things too, Carter, about you and Linda. You're on thin ice." To redeem himself, Hayes offered a dangerous ultimatum. Infiltrate a drug ring tied to corrupt cops. Refusal wasn't an option. As Carter left the office, his world felt smaller, the walls closing in. The man who'd once ruled the streets now stood on the edge of a precipice, his past sins a noose around his neck. For a man in his 60s who'd thought his battles were behind him, the fight for survival had only just begun. James Carter sat in his patrol car, the engine idling outside the precinct, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. At 62, he'd always believed his badge shielded him from consequences, an armor forged over decades of bending rules and wielding power. But now, Captain William Hayes' words echoed in his mind like a gavel. "That woman was my wife, Grace." The revelation had gutted him, stripping away the arrogance that once defined him. After his worst still, Hayes knew about his affair with Linda, the wife of his colleague Tom, a secret Carter thought he'd buried deep. The ultimatum, infiltrate a drug ring tied to corrupt cops or lose everything, hung over him like a storm cloud. For a man who'd spent his life intimidating others, Carter now felt the weight of fear, raw and unfamiliar, settling into his bones. The city's skyline glittered under the evening sky, but its beauty offered no solace. Carter drove home, the streets blurring past, his mind replaying the stop with Grace Thompson. Her calm defiance, those unyielding eyes, had unraveled him in ways he couldn't explain. At home, Ellen, his wife of 35 years, sat in the living room, her knitting needles clicking softly. At 60, she was a quiet presence, her once warm gaze now distant, their marriage eroded by years of Carter's neglect. "Long day?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah," he muttered, avoiding her eyes. He wanted to confess, to unburden himself, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he retreated to the den, pouring a whiskey that burned but didn't numb. The next morning, Hayes summoned Carter again. The captain's office felt like a courtroom, its air thick with judgment. "You start tonight," Hayes said, sliding a file across the desk. "The drug ring's moving a major shipment. You'll meet Agent Sam Riley, already embedded. He'll introduce you as a dirty cop looking for a cut." Carter's heart thudded. Undercover work was for younger men, not a veteran like him, whose knees ached and whose reflexes had dulled. He began, but Hayes cut him off. "No excuses, Carter. You made your bed." The captain's eyes softened for a moment, almost pitying. Grace didn't want to file a complaint. She believes in second chances. Don't prove her wrong. That night, Carter met Riley at a dive bar on the city's edge, its neon sign flickering like a warning. Riley, a wiry man in his 40s, sized him up with a skeptical glance. "You're the guy Hayes trusts?" he asked, nursing a beer. Carter nodded, his mouth dry. Just tell me what to do. Riley leaned in, his voice low. Tomorrow you meet Vince, the ring's enforcer. He doesn't trust anyone, especially cops. One wrong move and you're done. Carter's stomach churned, but he forced a nod, the whiskey from last night sour in his memory. The meeting with Vince took place in an abandoned warehouse, its rusted beams casting eerie shadows. Vince, a hulking man with a scar snaking across his cheek, eyed Carter like prey. So, you're the cop who wants in, he sneered, tossing a duffel bag at Carter's feet. Open it. Carter unzipped it, revealing stacks of cash, more money than he'd ever seen. His hands shook, not from greed, but from the realization of how deep he was in. You gotta move this for us, Vince said. Screw up and I'll bury you myself. Carter's pulse raced as he left the warehouse, the duffel bag heavy in his trunk. Driving back, he noticed a car tailing him, unmarked but too deliberate to be coincidence. Panic surged. Was it Hayes' team watching him, or Vince testing him? He pulled into an alley, heart pounding, and checked his rearview mirror. The car was gone. Breathing hard, he leaned back, only to freeze as his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know about Linda. Keep quiet, or she pays too. The words hit like a punch. Someone else knew his secret, and now Linda was in danger. The next day, Carter met Riley again, his nerves frayed. Someone's onto me, he whispered, showing the text. Riley's face darkened. Vince has eyes everywhere. Could be him, or someone higher up. Carter's mind raced. Had Hayes leaked the affair to pressure him? Or was it Tom, Linda's husband, seeking revenge? The uncertainty gnawed at him, each possibility more terrifying than the last. That night, the shipment operation began. Carter stood in a dimly lit dockyard, the stench of oil and salt water thick in the air. Vince handed him a gun, its weight cold and final. You're with me, he growled. As they loaded crates into a van, a sudden shout shattered the silence. Police, hands up! Floodlights blazed and chaos erupted. Carter dove behind a crate, his heart hammering. Bullets whizzed past, and he saw Vince aim at a figure in the shadows. Riley. Without thinking, Carter tackled Vince, the gun skidding across the pavement. As cuffs snapped onto Vince's wrists, Hayes emerged, his face grim. You did your part, Carter, he said, but his tone held no warmth. Carter stood, trembling, the text about Linda burning in his mind. He scanned the chaos, spotting Tom among the arresting officers, his eyes locked on Carter with a chilling intensity. Did Tom know, or was the threat from someone else, still watching? Back home, Ellen waited, her face unreadable. You're late, she said softly. Carter sank into a chair, the weight of his sins crushing him. He had survived the night, but the consequences of his actions, Grace, Linda, the drug ring, were a noose tightening around his heart. For a man who thought he was untouchable, the real reckoning was only beginning. James Carter slumped in his chair, the dim glow of the living room lamp casting long shadows across his weathered face. At 62, he'd spent decades as a cop, his badge a symbol of control, his authority a shield against the world's judgment. But now, the events of the past weeks, his humiliating stop of Grace Thompson, the wife of his captain, William Hayes, the exposure of his affair with Linda, a colleague's wife, and the harrowing undercover mission in a drug ring had stripped away his illusions of invincibility. The city's pulse, once a rhythm he commanded, now felt like a drumbeat counting down to his unraveling. For a man in his 60s, who had believed his battles were fought and won, the weight of his choices pressed harder than ever, each one a stone in a wall of regret that threatened to collapse. The morning after the dockyard operation, Carter drove to the precinct, his hands trembling on the wheel. The text about Linda, keep quiet or she pays too, still burned in his mind, a secret that could destroy not just him, but her as well. His marriage to Ellen, already frayed after 35 years, offered no refuge. Her silence at home was a quiet accusation he couldn't face. At the station, Captain Hayes waited, his office a fortress of authority. Sit, Hayes said, his voice steady but laced with a fatigue that mirrored Carter's own. The captain's dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, seemed to see through Carter's defenses. You pulled through last night, Hayes said, but this isn't over. You need to understand what you've done. Carter shifted uncomfortably, his throat dry. I did what you asked, sir. The ring's busted. Hayes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. This isn't about the mission, Carter. It's about why you were there. You stopped my wife because of who you thought she was. Because of her skin. You abused your power, and now you're paying for it. The words landed like a blow, stirring a shame Carter hadn't felt in years. He wanted to argue, to deflect, but the memory of Grace's calm defiance silenced him. Hayes slid a report across the desk. "You're on probation. One more misstep, and you're out. But I'm giving you a chance to make this right. Not for me, but for yourself." Carter nodded, his chest tight with a mix of relief and dread. The mission had been a crucible, each moment a test of his nerve. Meeting Vince, the drug ring's enforcer, had been like staring into a mirror of his own arrogance. Both men wielding power to intimidate, to control, but where Carter had once felt untouchable, Vince's cold eyes and the gun in his hand had reminded him of his mortality. That night, Carter returned to the warehouse district for a follow-up, his heart pounding as he met Agent Sam Riley under a flickering streetlight. Riley, lean and guarded, handed him a burner phone. "Vince's crew isn't done," he whispered. "Someone's leaking intel from inside the precinct." Carter's blood ran cold. Was it Tom, Linda's husband, seeking revenge? Or someone else, tied to the ominous text? The uncertainty gnawed at him, each step in the mission a tightrope walk over a pit of betrayal. At home, Ellen's presence was a quiet storm. She sat knitting, her grey hair catching the light, her eyes avoiding his. "You're not yourself," she said softly, her voice carrying a sadness that cut deeper than anger. Carter wanted to confess about Grace, Linda, the mission, but fear held him back. What if Ellen already knew? The thought was a knife in his gut. He poured a whiskey, the burn a fleeting distraction from the guilt that clung to him like damp cloth. The next day, a new shock awaited. At the precinct, Carter found a note slipped under his locker. "You can't hide forever." His hands shook as he crumpled it, his mind racing. Was it Vince's men, still active despite the bust? Or Tom, whose icy stares had grown sharper? Carter's world felt like a house of cards, each secret a gust threatening to topple it. He reported to Hayes, who assigned him to tail a new suspect. A cop suspected of tipping off the ring. The surveillance was grueling. Hours in a cramped car, the city's Hume a constant reminder of his precarious position. One night, tailing the suspect to a seedy motel, Carter spotted Tom's car parked nearby. His heart stopped. Was Tom the leak? Before he could act, a figure emerged. Not Tom, but Linda, her face pale under the neon glow. She saw Carter and froze, her eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They know." Before Carter could respond, headlights flared, and a black SUV screeched toward them. Carter shoved Linda behind a dumpster, his pulse roaring as he drew his gun, the mission and his secrets colliding in a heart-stopping moment. The SUV sped off, but the encounter left Carter shaken. He drove Linda home, the silence between them heavy with unspoken truths. Back at his own house, Ellen waited, her gaze softer now, as if sensing his breaking point. "James," she said, her voice a lifeline, "whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone." For the first time in years, Carter felt tears sting his eyes. His prejudice, his betrayal, his arrogance, they'd led him here, to a precipice where redemption seemed impossible. The city's lights flickered outside, a reminder that justice, like truth, waits for no one. Carter, once a man above consequence, now faced a truth older Americans might recognize. No badge can shield a heart from its own reckoning. His fight wasn't just for survival, it was for a chance to be better, to atone for the pain he'd caused, and to rebuild from the ashes of his mistakes. James Carter stood at the edge of his life. A man of 62, whose once unshakable confidence had crumbled under the weight of his own sins. The city's skyline, a mosaic of lights against the night, stretched beyond his living room window, but its beauty felt distant, unreachable. For decades, his badge had been a crown, his authority a scepter, but now, after the stop of Grace Thompson, the wife of Captain William Hayes, the exposure of his affair with Linda, and the perilous undercover mission to dismantle a drug ring, Carter was a king dethroned. Ellen, his wife of 35 years, sat across from him, her grey eyes soft yet searching, offering a lifeline he wasn't sure he deserved. At 60, she carried the quiet strength of a woman who'd endured his neglect. Her words, "You don't have to carry it alone," echoing in his heart like a fragile promise. But for Carter, the scars of his actions ran deep, and the path to redemption was a minefield of unexpected dangers. The next morning, Carter returned to the precinct, his steps heavy, his mind haunted by the note from his locker. "You can't hide forever." The threat, coupled with the SUV's near attack at the motel where he'd seen Linda, kept him on edge. Was it Tom, Linda's husband, seeking vengeance? Or remnants of Vince's drug ring, still lurking despite the bust? Captain Hayes called him in. His office a stark reminder of Carter's. "You're not done," Hayes said, his voice firm but weary. We've got a lead on the leak inside the precinct. You're meeting Riley tonight to follow it. Carter nodded, his chest tight. The mission had saved his career, but each new task felt like a test he might fail. That evening, Carter met Agent Sam Riley at a derelict pier, the air thick with salt water and tension. Riley, his face shadowed under a cap, handed Carter a flash drive. "This has names." "Cops tied to the ring, but someone's watching us," he whispered, glancing at the darkness beyond the pier's edge. Carter's pulse quickened. Before he could respond, a low rumble broke the silence. A speedboat slicing through the water, its spotlight blinding them. "Get down!" Riley shouted, shoving Carter behind a crate. Gunfire erupted, bullets splintering wood. Carter's heart pounded as he drew his weapon, his arthritic hands shaking. In a split-second decision, he fired at the boat's engine, sparking an explosion that lit the night. The boat veered off, but Riley clutched his arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. "Go!" Riley gasped. "Get the drive to Hayes." Carter fled, the flash drive burning in his pocket, his mind reeling. At a safe house, he examined the drive's contents, his breath catching as he saw Tom's name among the corrupt cops. The betrayal stung. Tom, his colleague of 20 years, had been playing a double game, but another name stopped Carter cold. Ellen. His wife's name listed as a contact for an unknown source. His world tilted. Was Ellen involved, or was this a setup to break him? The thought was unthinkable, yet doubt gnawed at him, a poison seeping into his love for her. He drove home, the sitters hum a mocking chorus. Ellen was in the kitchen, humming softly as she brewed tea, her presence a balm and a question mark. "You're late," she said, her smile fading as she saw his face. Carter's voice cracked. "Ellen, what do you know about my work?" Her eyes widened, confusion flickering. "What do you mean?" Before he could press, his phone buzzed. A photo from an unknown number, showing Ellen at a cafe with a man Carter recognized. Vince's second-in-command, thought to be in custody. Rage and fear collided in his chest. "Tell me the truth," he demanded, slamming the phone down. Ellen flinched, tears welling. "James, I don't know what you're talking about." The doorbell rang, shattering the moments. Carter opened it to find Tom, his face a mask of fury. "You've gone too far," Tom growled, shoving past him. Carter's heart stopped. Tom knew about Linda, but before words could escalate, headlights flared outside. A black SUV screeched to a stop, and masked men poured out, firing wildly. Carter tackled Ellen to the floor, shielding her as glass shattered. Tom fired back, his loyalty a shocking twist. In the chaos, Carter spotted Hayes' team arriving, their sirens a lifeline. The attackers fled, but Tom lay bleeding, his eyes meeting Carter's. "I didn't leak," he rasped. "Protect Linda." As paramedics rushed in, Carter held Ellen, her sobs shaking them both. The photo, the drive. Were they lies to fracture him? Hayes approached, his face grim. "We got the real leak," he said. "It wasn't Tom or your wife. It was Riley, playing both sides." The revelation hit like a tidal wave. Riley, his guide, had betrayed them all. Carter's knees buckled, guilt flooding him for doubting Ellen. That night he sat with her, their hands entwined. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears tracing his lined face. The city's lights flickered outside, a reminder that redemption is a painful journey. For older Americans, Carter's story mirrors a truth. Mistakes scar, but the fight to be better, through love, through atonement, defines a life's worth. His battle wasn't over, but with Ellen by his side, he faced it, with a heart cracked open, ready to heal. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of their modest home, casting a soft glow on the kitchen table where Carter sat, his coffee untouched. At 62, he'd seen the city's underbelly, faced death in a hail of bullets, and nearly lost everything to his own arrogance and prejudice. The scars of stopping Grace Thompson, betraying his colleague Tom with an affair, and navigating the treacherous web of a drug ring lingered like shadows. Yet, Ellen's hand, warm in his, anchored him. Her forgiveness, offered in the quiet of their tearful embrace, was a lifeline he hadn't dared hope for. At 60, Ellen's strength shone through her gentle smile, a reminder that love could endure even a lifetime of mistakes. Carter returned to the precinct, his badge heavier now, not with pride but with responsibility. Captain William Hayes called him in one last time, his office no longer a courtroom but a place of reckoning. "You've got one last chance, Carter," Hayes said, his voice firm yet tempered with something like respect. "Not because of me, but because Grace believed you could change." Carter nodded, the weight of Grace's dignity and Ellen's loyalty pressing against his chest. the flash drive, the ambush, the betrayal by Agent Riley. It had all exposed the rot within the system and within himself. Tom, now recovering, had forgiven him. A Grace Carter knew he didn't deserve. Each day became a step toward redemption. Carter patrolled with new eyes, seeing the faces behind the windows, the stories behind the streets. He stopped assuming, stopped wielding his power like a club. At home, he and Ellen talked, really talked. For the first time in years, he shared his fears, his shame. The way Grace's calm gaze had unraveled him. Ellen listened, her hands squeezing his, her love a bridge over the chasm of their past. The city's pulse, once a rhythm of control, now hummed with possibility. Carter, once untouchable, was now vulnerable, human. For older Americans, his journey is a mirror. Mistakes leave scars, but redemption lies in owning them, in choosing to be better, in rebuilding trust with those who matter most. Carter's life had changed, not by erasing his past, but by facing it. Step by painful step. He wasn't the man he'd been, and that was his salvation. If this story of redemption and reckoning resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel for more tales of human struggle and triumph. Your support keeps these stories alive, and we're grateful for every one of you joining us on this journey. Thank you.